Kirill Kaprizov just turned down an 8-year, $128 million contract extension, the richest offer in NHL history. Here's the twist. David Pastrnak has been far more productive over the last 3 years, and the Bruins have him locked up long-term for just $11.25 million a year. How does this spotlight the Bruins' roster-building choices with $83 million already committed for next season with a bevy of other high-profile free agents set to hit the market? Let's discuss on today's episode of Locked On Boston Bruins.
You're Locked On Bruins, your daily podcast on the Boston Bruins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Bruins fans, and welcome back to the Locked On Boston Bruins podcast. I'm your host, Ian McLaren, and this is a daily show where we discuss all things spoke to be. Thank you so much for making Locked On Boston Bruins your first listen every day. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And on today's show, we're going to discuss Kirill Kaprizov rejecting a $128 million offer from the Minnesota Wild, what it says about superstar power in the cap boom era, and how he compares to our own David Pastrnak. We're also going to take a look at the stacked 2026 free agent class, which includes Connor McDavid, Jack Eichel, and more, and how Boston's cap commitments compare. Finally, our Bruin of the day, a defenseman tied to Caprizov in one of Boston's great what-if draft stories. Now, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com and win $300 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Before we get into today's podcast, a quick reminder, you can find the podcast on social media at Locked NHL Bruins. You can find me, my hockey thoughts, dad jokes at Ian C. McLaren. I'm a lifelong Boston Bruins fan, and I've been covering this team and the NHL for various outlets for 20 years now. All right, so Kirill Kaprizov's rejection of an 8-year, $128 million extension shows how the NHL's elite players now hold the leverage, especially with the salary cap rising fast. The deal would have paid him $16 million per year, which is $2 million more than Leon Draisaitl will make this season, the current highest paid player in the NHL. It's the richest offer in league history. Caprizov, reportedly to date, has said no. And this comes on the heels of Connor McDavid going all summer. He was eligible to sign a contract extension with the Edmonton Oilers back on July 1. He too has not recommitted beyond this upcoming season. He could easily command like $20 million. What is going on in the NHL right now? Well, there's an expected salary cap boom. Last season, the cap was $88 million. This season, it's $95.5 million. In 2026-27, it's reportedly going to be around $104 million. And the next season after that, $113.5 million. That's an $18 million jump over the next 2 seasons. So what looks like an overpay today might look like a discount tomorrow. By 2027, $16 million AAV is only going to be about 14% of the cap. Now, there's a bit of a CBA wrinkle here. The NHL and the NHLPA have agreed to a new collective bargaining agreement. And this is the final window for an 8-year deal. In the next CBA, which that'll kick in at the beginning of next season, max terms actually shrink. So it's 7 years if you stay, 6 if you sign on the open market. So that adds urgency for both sides. Look, with McDavid, with Caprizov, they're trying to assess whether they should stay locked in with their respective clubs because you want a chance to win on top of maximizing your value. And perhaps it's smarter to take shorter term deals with the cap rising this much. Who knows if it'll keep rising at this rate, but maybe you take shorter term deals at max money and then assess your options after that and see, well, maybe I have a better shot to win here or there. For the Minnesota Wild, they finally shed most of the Zach Parise and Ryan Suter buyout penalties. They're down to about $833,000 each for the next 4 seasons, I believe. So that's 1.66 in dead money. But money alone doesn't guarantee Caprizov will stay. He wants a winner. The Wild have struggled to build one, albeit with those significant not overages, but significant chunk of the cap being paid out to those 2 players after being bought out. They do have a great young core with Marco Rossi, Matt Boldy, Joel Eriksson-Ek, Brock Faber, Zev Buim coming in, David Jiricek, Philip Gustafsson, and net. It's a competitive team that should be able to compete. But Caprizov tapping the brakes on jumping at the first, albeit biggest, offer in NHL history. Now, what does this all have to do with the Boston Bruins? Well, look at Boston's best player, David Pastrnak, who is locked in at $11.25 million through 2031. And if you compare Pastrnak and Caprizov over the last 3 years, it's really no contest. Caprizov has had some injury issues, so he's played about 63 fewer games, but Pastrnak has scored 40 more goals, 151 versus 111. Pastrnak has 178 assists versus 116 for Caprizov. So 329 total points, 227 points for Caprizov. That's a 1.34 point per game average for Pasta, 1.24 point per game average for Caprizov. And on top of that, Pasta has about 500 more shots, or 450. In 19 of 26 tracked categories via Dauber, and that's like points per game, shot rates, all this kind of stuff, he wins 19 of those. He's also been more durable, more consistent, and Boston pays him $5 million less per year than the deal Caprizov just declined. That just shows you, A, how extremely valuable that David Pastrnak contract is, and what an amazing value they're getting out of him. You even compare him to Draisaitl's at $14 million. Yeah, Draisaitl's clearly the better player, but for the Bruins to be locked in to David Pastrnak through his prime years, through 2031, that's huge as the cap continues to rise. If he were to hit free agency today, he would be commanding Caprizov level contracts. Superstars in today's NHL are starting to dictate the terms a little more. You're seeing Mitch Marner leaving Toronto. Matthew Tkachuk kind of pushed his way to Florida. Kaprizov's forcing Minnesota to prove they're a contender. And the Bruins avoided this nightmare by securing Pastrnak early for 8 years at a price that will only look cheaper as the cap rises. But here's the kicker. If Caprizov can walk away from $128 million and you have Pastrnak locked in at $11.25 million per season, what are you going to do to maximize the cap space around him, around Charlie McAvoy, who's equally valuable on his contract, Jeremy Swayman, those core guys? Will they be able to spend in 2026 when Connor McDavid, Jack Eichel, and others potentially hit the market? Let's break down the names and see where the Bruins fit in and why they're a bit hamstrung here as the podcast continues. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if that bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love using FanDuel because it fits however I like to bet, player props, building a same-game parlay, even jumping in live as the action unfolds. It makes every game more exciting, whether you're watching your team or just keeping an eye on your fantasy lineup. It's quick, easy, and the best way to add a little more energy to your Sundays, even your Thursday evenings and Monday nights. If you're ready to play, download the FanDuel app by visiting FanDuel.com. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. Get started, and if you hit that bet, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. All right, so Kirill Kaprizov turning down this record offer that would have made him the highest paid player in NHL history. It shows us how lucky the Bruins are to have David Pastrnak locked in at $11.25 million, and even to a certain degree, guys like Charlie McAvoy and Jeremy Swayman. Your core players signed before this spike in the salary cap, and where players are able to turn down these record offers and really assess their options. The trick, though, is to surround these guys with some other players that can maximize their primes. And the Bruins should be able, with the cap going up, to entertain offers for some of the headliners in the 2026 free agent class, which could be one of the most stacked in history, with the rising cap pushing superstar deals into uncharted territory. A lot of these guys were drafted in 2015. They had their ELCs, signed some deals, and now they're eligible for unrestricted free agency. Connor McDavid, he's making $12.5 million now. Easily could be worth $20 million. Realistic deal, maybe, 18 to 20 will set a new NHL record. Like whatever Caprizov gets paid, McDavid easily goes above him. Jack Eichel is going to be an unrestricted free agent. Tantalizing because of the Boston ties there. He's won a cup. Still elite, coming off the best season of his career. Likely around 12 to 13 million. Who knows what's going to happen there? We've already mentioned Caprizov turning down the $16 million offer. Depending on what happens this season, maybe he's betting on himself and doesn't want to limit himself to Minnesota, wants to see what's out there on the open market. You have Kyle Connor, who the Bruins notoriously passed on in 2015 in favor of Jake DeBrusk, Zach Senyshyn, Jakub Zboril. 40 goal consistently, could have at least $11 to $12 million, like making more than Pastrnak on the open market this season. You also have an older guy in Artemi Panarin, still productive, and right now he's making 11.64. Could he get a raise on top of that? Who knows? There's also some tier 2 stars that could be available. Adrian Kempe could double his salary to around 9 to 10 million. Martin Necas has dynamic skill, always tied to the Bruins because of those check ties. $9 million is realistic for him. Alex Tuch in Buffalo, he's bringing size, scoring, leadership. 7 to 8 million easily for him. Same with defenseman Rasmus Andersson. Right shot D, plays big minutes, could fetch 7 to 8 million. There are some rumblings the Bruins may be interested, reunite him with Elias Lindholm, Nikita Zadorov, etc. Sergei Bobrovsky is going to be an unrestricted free agent potentially. 2-time Cup winner. He's already making $10 million. A short-term, high-dollar contract is very possible. Now, the Bruins, they already have $83 million committed for next season. So that leaves them with about $21 million to play with more than one spot to fill. So McDavid's probably likely off the table. Caprizov, maybe Eichel, all those big time free agents. And the problem is, while the core is locked in at below what comparable stars will earn in the new market, you have a high level goaltender hitting the market. He's going to get more than $8.25 million. And if Swayman can rebound and be the kind of guy that we know he can be this upcoming season, he'll be playing above that $8.25 million valuation. Same with star defensemen, and especially with elite forwards like David Pastrnak, well below what comparable stars will earn in this new environment. Again, just compare him to what Caprizov has done over the last 3 years. Pastrnak has been much more productive, and this past season with a lesser supporting cast. The Bruins have kind of limited their flexibility, though, by committing to Elias Lindholm, Nikita Zadorov long-term. That's almost $13 million between those two. Took $3.4 million off the table by signing Tanner Jeannot for 5 years. They're okay players, but they chew up cap space that Boston could have used to chase elite talent. Maybe the Bruins would have been better off not pursuing Lindholm and Zadorov. They thought, well, we're coming off a series win over the Toronto Maple Leafs. We held it together pretty well against the Florida Panthers in the second round. Maybe by adding these two guys, it will help us get over the hump. And then we all know last season went off the rails quickly and decisively. Now they're locked into these guys long term, and they're not able to pursue some of these more prominent free agents next summer. So maybe they should have not spent, seen what happens, try to fill some gaps, and look ahead a little bit, go big game hunting in 2026. But that's kind of off the table because they do have some cap space, but they also have money committed to some players and not a lot of guys coming off the books. Victor Arvidsson is a UFA, Alex Steves, Jeffrey Viel, Andrew Peak, but that's not like you're still going to need some depth there, and some of their money is already overcommitted in terms of those depth signings. Maybe they move out a Zaka or a Middlestat in order to make some more room, but they're kind of limited right now because of those commitments. They're good players, but they chew up cap space Boston could have used to chase more elite talent. By next summer, McDavid could easily be making $20 million. Maybe Caprizov pushes for 18. In a couple of years, 20 million AAV isn't crazy for a generational star. Maybe a guy like Connor Bedard, Macklin Celebrini making that kind of money. Boston's edge is having their stars locked in at yesterday's numbers, but their margin for error is thin because of those mid-tier contracts that are eating space. The Bruins won't be big game hunters in 2026 unless they're able to shed a bunch of cap space in Korpisalo, Zaka, Middlestat. Their path is betting on the core that they have, Pastrnak, McAvoy, Swayman, hoping younger players like Patra, Menton, Lysell, Lori provide cheap upside and that they can get value out of the players that they have already committed to in Lindholm, Zadorov, even Jeannot to a certain extent, as their bigger signings over the last couple of summers. As the cap goes up, their hits will be easier to absorb, but the totality of their deals and their contracts, the space that they're taking up on the roster, kind of takes the Bruins, for now at least, out of the running for that big game hunting in 2026. So that's kind of unfortunate. You don't want to waste Pasternak's prime years, nor McAvoy's or Swayman's. Those three guys are locked in at very reasonable deals compared to what players at their levels and at their respective positions could earn on the open market, especially David Pastrnak. Whether or not Boston is able to surround them with the kind of talent to win remains to be seen. And the free agent signings over the last couple of summers by Don Sweeney don't provide much confidence. Yeah, they drafted James Higgins, who could pop over the next couple of years. Don Sweeney did some good work by shedding some contracts in Charlie Coyle, Brandon Carlo, and getting futures for them. But again, it's all about hitting at the right time, the core and the surrounding cast being able to complement each other in the best possible way. And if all that can come together in the next couple of years, that would be fantastic. If not, it would be a big waste of Pasternak's prime years at what will be seen as a discounted rate by the end of that contract. Now, speaking of Caprizov, did you know the Bruins once owned the draft pick that became him? Our Bruin of the day is forever tied to one of Boston's painful what ifs, and we'll touch on that here as the podcast continues. Most people can't name all their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's 401ks, properties, or investments. And when you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. That's why there's Monarch Money, an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or your phone. Monarch is built for people with busy lives, and if you put off organizing your finances, Monarch is for you. Monarch does the heavy lifting. You can link all your accounts in minutes, see clear data visuals, get smart categorization of your spending, and finally feel in control of your money without ever touching a spreadsheet. Don't let financial opportunities slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with code LOCKEDONNHL. Today's Bruin of the day is a bit of a what-if situation. Now, in 2015, the Boston Bruins swapped fifth-rounders with the Minnesota Wild. The Bruins gave their fifth to the Minnesota Wild in exchange for a fifth-round pick in 2016. Lo and behold, with that pick in the fifth round of the 2015 draft, the Minnesota Wild, 135th overall, selected Kirill Kaprizov. And he has become one of the top players from that draft class. One that featured Connor McDavid, Mitch Marner, Mikko Rantanen, Sebastian Aho, Jack Eichel, Kyle Connor, Travis Konechny, Matthew Barzal, Timo Meier, Brock Besser, Kirill Kaprizov. These are all guys who have scored more points than Kaprizov. Kaprizov, of course, didn't join the NHL until, 2021 because of commitments over in the KHL. Hit the ground running and has been unreal ever since. 108-point season back in 2021-22, 75 points in 67 games the season after that, 96 points in 75 games in 2023-24, and then 56 points in 41 games last season, which would have put him 1 point back of Pastrnak if he had played a full season. It was cut short due to injury. A year later, the Bruins used their fifth-round pick to select Cameron Clarke. Now, Cameron Clarke, he was recently hired by the Cornell men's hockey team, joining their coaching staff. Will be entering his first season as an assistant coach with the Big Red. He spent 2 seasons as an assistant at Norwich, a Vermont-based Division III program. Besides his assistant coaching responsibilities, he also served as the Cadets' head men's golf coach. Before joining Norwich's coaching staff, spent 3 seasons playing in the ECHL, which with the Wichita Thunder and the Toledo Walleye. This all came after a 4-year stint at Ferris State, where he scored 33 points over 126 career games under legendary coach Bob Daniels. He was drafted by the Bruins in the 5th round, 136th overall, in the 2016 NHL entry draft after a breakout season with the Lone Star Brahmas of the North American Hockey League, where he had 50 points in 59 regular season games. He was named to the NAHL South All-Star Team, received League's Defenseman of the Year award, First Team All-Star, both the highest totals by any defenseman in the league. Now, as you can see, there's no NHL gameplay on his resume. He did max out playing-wise at the ECHL level, but he's building his way up as a coach. We have Kirill Kaprizov turning down a contract that would pay him $16 million per season. Clarke joining the Cornell men's hockey coaching staff and will assist with the Big Reds hockey program this season. Quite a stark contrast between the two fifth round picks. A real pain point for Boston Bruins fans. Caprizov just made history by turning down $128 million. Clarke never made it to the NHL, and it echoes 2007. Where Boston traded a 5th-round pick to Columbus for Adam McQuaid, a guy who had a successful NHL career, Stanley Cup winner, now director of player development with the Bruins. But that pick became Jamie Benn. Clarke is a success story in his own right, but it's another example of how razor thin the margins are in the draft and how a simple 5th-round swap can ripple through franchise history. Could you imagine the Bruins? They go DeBrusk, Zboril, Senyshyn in round 1 of the 2015 NHL entry draft. And then they keep that pick and select Caprizov. Yeah, there would have been some immediate criticism of those picks. But if you can, 5 years later, bring Caprizov over to North America and he pops in this way for the Bruins alongside David Pastrnak, I mean, nobody's talking about how that was one of the worst drafts in history. Clarke didn't skate for the Bruins, but he's now coaching at a high level. Maybe he'll make his way up to the NHL one day. His story, though, is tied to Caprizov, and it's a reminder that Boston has had more than its share of what-if draft moments, like a handful of them from 2015 alone. Yeah, they ended up with Pavel Zacha from that draft. But at the same time, Caprizov would have been quite a grab. DeBrusk left for nothing. Senyshyn, Zboril kind of faded away. The old Barzal, Connor, Shillington thing kind of broke down because Shillington hasn't really developed. But Barzal, Connor, Shabbat, that would have been a nice haul. And speaking of cap, you would have a lot committed to those 3 guys for sure. So it's all kind of relative, but just kind of a fun thing to look at when we're talking about Kirill Kaprizov and a connection to the Boston Bruins. So we covered his $128 million rejection, the superstar leverage it represents, the Bruins having their core guys signed to very reasonable contracts in an increasing cap world, and also how perhaps surrounding them hasn't been super successful. Wrap things up with the Bruin of the day, Connor McDavid. Congrats on the new gig. Good luck at Cornell. Andy Bernard will be rooting for you. Tomorrow, we're going to have a guest on the show. Later today, I'm headed to Toronto Blue Jays game. Very much looking forward to that. Tickets purchased on Game Time, not one of today's sponsors, but check them out, of course. Don't forget to follow Locked On Boston Bruins on your favorite podcast app, YouTube, social media at Locked NHL Bruins. Please do interact, engage, It really goes a long way towards expanding the reach of the podcast. Please tell a friend or a Bruins loving person in your life about the show. And excited to get going next week with Prospects Challenge recaps, the beginning of training camp. First preseason game is only 10 days away. All right, take care of yourselves, friends. Take care of each other. Crazy world out there, but let's continue to, take care of each other. And we'll talk to you again here on the next episode of Locked On Boston Bruins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your favorite team every single day.